is we want to get home and watch this football game. So we'll get started on a work session tonight. Mr. Fearborn, first item, community conversation on the executive summary.
And I will turn it over to the esteemed persons at the end of the table.
Thank you. So good to be here with you tonight. The last time Jonathan and I had the opportunity to be in Raymore, the Chiefs were playing the Broncos. So, yeah. Yeah, there was a TV in the lobby then. So we're glad to be back here with you. As I told a couple of you before the meeting started, there are a lot of words on these slides. We are not going to be going through every single word. We will be giving you kind of the high-level overview and really kind of pointing out the things that that we think are important. With that having been said, if you see something that we don't touch on, please feel free to ask us a question as we go through this. So, first of all, when we began this initiative, Mr. Fearborn told us, yes, we wanted to assess satisfaction with the strategic plan that was done in 2016. But what was more important, he thought, was, okay, let's not just kind of rest on our laurels, but let's really look ahead and find out what the governing body and the citizens of Raymore want to do, how we build on a strong foundation. And so that's what we set out to do. And there were really kind of two distinct efforts for that. First of all, it was council engagement that we did in September. And then, of course, the biggest initiative was the community conversation that we did in October. So tonight, what we'll do is we'll cover those two primary categories. First, starting with the council conversation. It was about 2 months ago that we were here for that discussion, and so we want to make sure that we can remind you what you said. Because we all want to do some comparisons then in terms of what you said and what you heard from the community in October. And I think you'll be pleased to find out that there were a lot of similarities. In the community conversation, we'll focus on each of the 4 strategic focus areas as well as the recommendations. One of the things I would like to point out, and when we get to the recommendations, is that something that was developed by our team at the Public Management Center. It's something that we simply have put it in the report and provided to the city staff. And so certainly one of the next steps, which we'll get to, is the staff has to take those and really make them real for your community and working in conjunction with you. So in general terms, what we found is residents are very, very positive about what's going on within their community, whether you talk to them about the services that you're providing, the engagement through things like the community conversation, through the different events, through the places to gather. As I mentioned already, there were a lot of similarities between what we heard from the residents as well as what the governing body said in September. So it was, I think it's important to note that no new strategic focus areas emerged. So those strategic focus areas remain firm, but there are new recommendations within each of those. And now we'll go through to the council conversation. So the first question that we asked you is, as you consider what happened in the last 2 to 3 years, what are you most proud of? And you see on this slide what you all said you were most proud of in the last 2 or 3 years. I want to compare that with what we heard from the residents in October, what they were most proud of in the last 2 or 3 years. And I might say that it's really council focused on the process and residents focused on the outcomes. So council said, we're really pleased with the GO bond passage, right? Residents say, we love Centerview. We love the parks. We love the activity centers coming. So really, that's what they said. Again, council focused on the process, residents focused on the outcome. Improved infrastructure, right? You said we have improved infrastructure. The residents said we have improved infrastructure improvements to connect neighborhoods, and specifically mentioned sidewalks and trails and new street connections, really focusing on that connection, as well as some lighting improvements as well. You also mentioned you were pleased with the citizen engagement. Well, that came out time and time again, whether we were asking the questions throughout the course of the evening in October or when we asked the final question, which was, what kind of gives you hope for the future of Raymore? So again, a lot of similarities, different ways to describe those achievements, but a lot of similarities. So when asked what you hope for Raymore to be in the future, the council said, we want to make sure that we are the premier suburb within the Kansas City metropolitan area where people feel safe, that they have varied opportunities for employment, that they have access to events and activities, and they are served by a quality staff. The next thing we did with all of you in September was take you through each of the strategic focus areas. And so just as a reminder, those are community identity and connections, safe, well-designed, and beautiful places, economic vitality, and a high-performing organization. And so here again, we asked, okay, so as a council, what do you hope for in each of these strategic focus areas? This really mirrors, again, what was said in terms of the foundation that you've already started, right? So we want to make sure that we build on having gathering spaces, that we want to have businesses that can employ our excuse me, I looked at the pop-up there, I apologize. We want to have both businesses that can employ our residents. And one thing that you all mentioned that we did not hear from residents specifically, but you want to make sure that you have an active and involved governing body. For safe, well-designed, and beautiful places, you really focused here on the infrastructure improvements that were necessary to have those safe, well-designed, and beautiful places. You'll see later that the community, while they did focus some on infrastructure improvements, they really focused a lot on public safety, which is probably no surprise, yeah. For economic vitality, you indicated you wanted diversified development. So not just diversified development, but that development that encourages job growth. And not just job growth, but you want to make sure that the people who live in Raymore have the skills that are necessary to get those high quality jobs. And so really, how can you focus on workforce development? You don't want to drive down Raymore roads and just see every business that you can find, and maybe every other community, but really want to be a destination spot. And you want to support those local businesses, those local unique businesses. Lastly, in considering the high-performing organization, the City Council really focused on having a quality staff, making sure that you give them the tools that are necessary to do the work that you expect of them and that the residents have come to expect as well. You also recognize that there are always transitions within this quality staff, although you don't like to see that because I know that you really value them, but let's make sure that you're planning for those transitions and doing succession plannings, not just within the organization, but also within the community as well. And making sure that, that you are encouraging their professional development. So really, bottom line, I think, is actually the top bullet point, which is you want to be an employer of choice.
Okay, so on October 1st, we convened a community conversation, and as you'll recall, this was a follow-up to the 3 that we did in February of 2016. And the council had asked that we re-engage the community to find out how well we're tracking, find out what the community felt was successes from the initial effort, and then see how we might flesh out their ideas around the strategic focus areas this time around. So we scheduled this well in advance. It ended up being also on Monday Night Football, as you recall. And so we were concerned about turnout, and we ended up with at least 127 community members at the meeting, which was just a fantastic turnout. And we had even more than that in the room. So that was a testament to some great outreach on the city and the staff's part and council's part to reach out to the community. I want to point out that we did do a few demographic questions just at the beginning to find out who was in the room. And one of the questions that I was curious about was, had they attended the prior community conversations? And we had 20 individuals who had attended all 3 in February of 2016 who also attended on October 1st of this year. But you had 84 individuals who had not participated at all in 2016. So about 2/3 of the folks that came on October 1st were brand new to this process. And I think that's also a testament to the efforts that you all made to reach out and engage the community in an even broader way. And so, so that was yet another success, I think, in that effort. So what we did was we used, again, the 21st century town hall technology, where at each table there was an iPad and people were able to enter their individual responses, and then we had a theme team that crafted the common themes that emerged from each category. And so, as Patty mentioned, what we were looking to do was to flesh out details around each of the 4 strategic focus areas. And the first that we looked at was the area of community identity and connections. And so with the community and identity, this was one of the main themes that, or strategic focus areas, excuse me, that we wanted to tackle the very first time around. And what we found was we posed the question, what brings you home to Raymore? And what are the reasons that you make Raymore your home? So what we heard...
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
So one thing that, just to, as a reminder, what we did that evening, first of all, we asked them just generally, okay, a question like what brings you home to Raymore, or what makes you feel safe in Raymore, that kind of thing. And so we asked that question, and then we asked a follow-up question. How could we make you feel even more connected, or how can we make you feel even more safe? And so it's the second question that we actually did the polling on. So
Yes.
I think that, so you'll see kind of two different kinds of tables. So
And you'll see the language there. The second question always includes some word like specifically.
Right.
And that's a intentional by design. So at the beginning, you get more of a values, principles-based response. And the second question, you get at more specific project-based things that are more implementation-focused. So here, what brings you home? People spoke of award-winning school districts, the small-town community feel, parks and trails accessibility. It's a safe place to raise your family. We heard multiple references to family and grandchildren. Raymore has the best roads, infrastructure, and sidewalks, great options and services for retirees, housing opportunities that provide more value than other KC metro communities, and the crime rate is lower, it's quiet, and feels safer. So the follow-up question then we asked is, what specifically would strengthen Raymore's community identity and connections among residents? And so here we, our theme team came up with these common themes that emerged. We turned this into a polling question, and as you'll recall, each participant had a clicker at their table, and so they could vote. And we asked them to vote for the top 2 out of their choices here. Nearly 30% identified hold more public events, including jazz on the lawn, parades, block parties, etc. And this really spoke to the community's desire to have more formal opportunities to engage with one another that the city can help champion. Centralized and easy communication method for notifying residents of important information was the next highest, and this included everything from social media, email, flyers, digital billboard, community access channel. And then an emphasis on continuing to stay safe. Now, I won't go into detail on all the others listed there, but it's all included in our report that we submitted, so you can get an idea of what else was important to the community.
any questions on that before we go to the next one? No? Okay, great. So the next, oh goodness. The next one is safe, well-designed, and beautiful places. And this was pretty all-encompassing as a strategic focus area in and of itself, so we did break it up into two separate lines of questioning. And the first was focusing on safe. And so what makes you feel that Raymore is a safe community? And you'll recall that earlier I said that you all really focused on the infrastructure improvements that made Raymore a safe community. Here you see that's really the public safety departments that people were really focusing on for the most part. However, they did say that lighting was really important. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this particular response is that they said their neighbors make them feel safe. And I think that is great that folks are saying they're connected with their neighbors and they watch out for each other. So in asking what specifically can we do to make Raymore an even safer community, again, it's no surprise that really continue those community policing efforts. I think the chief can be glad to know that those are recognized. But as well, they want to be able to communicate even more, not necessarily just with their neighbors, but in knowing what's going on in the community. So would like to see more mechanisms, set up for that communication, and to continue to encourage neighbors to watch out for each other for any suspicious activity. So again, it's continuing the public safety services that you have, but also really focusing on communicating what the issues are. So the second half of that strategic focus area is well-designed and beautiful. So when we ask folks what makes Raymore well-designed and beautiful, and what are some examples, you found any number of things, from the walking trails and playgrounds to the new facilities, which we've already mentioned, Centerview, the Activity Center, City Hall, the fact that new developments are attractive, and roundabouts and landscaping are looking good. So there were a lot of different examples of what folks thought made Raymore a well-designed and beautiful place. So when asked, okay, what can we do to make it even more well-designed and beautiful, there was not a lot of consensus on any of these. There were a lot of ideas, but not a lot of consensus. You can see that really the top two are very close. So continued beautification, as well as making the entry point to Raymore more beautiful, to doing things that you can really say are just general community beautification processes, holiday decor, keeping up the landscaping in subdivisions, having more lighting and trails.
And I think this slide is a great illustration of how the community will have a number of items that are of interest to them that they feel are important. This is where you really need the expertise of staff to begin to build out what are some different options, what are the costs associated with that, what's currently in the works, how does this fit into your other planning efforts, and then where you as council ultimately have some decisions to make around priorities and resource allocation. So this is a nice list, but it doesn't solve the hard questions of what do we want to tackle first, and what do we have the resources to pursue. Okay, the next strategic focus area then is economic vitality. And the first question that we posed is, what are the current strengths of the Raymore economy? So what we heard was consistent growth with several opportunities for more in both housing, in commercial and retail. The good location, easy access to major arteries like I-49 and 291. The breadth of retail and commercial opportunities within Raymore. Multiple references to or comments, we can spend our money locally. Fiscally responsible city with the willingness to listen to the community. That was a common theme that emerged. And then qualities that attract and maintain a solid tax base. Schools, good housing options, and retail. And so when we put that forward, we asked what is necessary for Raymore to have a thriving economy with businesses, job opportunities, and financially secure families. And again, we asked people to vote, in this case, their top 3 choices. And the top vote getter here was focus on businesses that will provide job opportunities for Raymore residents, including light industry, manufacturing, and technology. The next several were all grouped pretty closely together. So bring a variety of sit-down restaurants to town, attract businesses that provide high-paying jobs, offer resources to support small businesses, including a business incubator and shared spaces, and create opportunities for mixed-use development that encompasses housing, retail, and entertainment. And then a few references to make the Raymore experience unique with diverse businesses that are locally owned. So again, you'll see a variety of ideas kind of that need fleshed out, and that as you dialogue with staff and look to make some priority decisions there, you can see how the community weighed in on that.
And I would like to point out that, again, the council was right in line in your September conversation with the #1 priority that's listed here from the residents. So I wanted to point that out again. So high-performing organization. This was the last series of questions that we asked on that October evening. And so the first question was, what do you think the city is doing best in terms of providing services to Raymore residents? I love that it's a long list. That indicates that they really appreciate the services that their municipal government provides. But really there's a focus on communication, having a lot of communication in a variety of means. They mentioned basic services, right? Nothing flashy about this, right? But they appreciate the trash pickup. They appreciate the snow removal. They appreciate the police and fire departments. So saying, hey, we know that that's, you know, at the base what we need from our city, and you're doing that. Community engagement. We heard time and again how much people appreciated being asked, not just asked what they wanted in their community, but that you listen to what they have to say. And then lastly, a responsive staff. They indicated that they feel like they might not like a response that they get from staff, but certainly they know that their staff is going to be speaking with them and letting them know what's going on. So then we asked, how would you like city leaders to keep you engaged to ensure that we provide the highest quality services possible? So no surprise that the #1 response was, let's keep on having meetings like this, but maybe not on Monday night football nights, right? And Jonathan, do you happen to know how many people did we ask them to do 2, vote on 2, the top 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Top 2.
So this was the top 2. So this was fairly clear in terms of some of the others then. So also make improvements to the website. So needs more information on who to call, the calendar of city events, et cetera. You know, we talked a lot with staff about this communication issue actually as we gave them the draft report, and we know that there's been a lot of emphasis on communication. And I think what this just means is you can't communicate too much, right? And what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. And so I'd say keep up the good work in what you're trying to do.
On a related note, one of the things that we observed back in February of 2016 in that regard is that you really heightened expectations by doing these community conversations. So on the one hand, it was a success in that you were able to engage so many people in the community. On the other hand, now the expectation is higher that you continue to do such a good job of communicating. And so I think that that's probably embedded within some of these responses when they're asking for more communication, because you're obviously doing some very good work here, but now they expect even more. Okay, so the summary of recommendations here. So just a few observations. First of all, that there were no new strategic focus areas emerged. So that's reflective of the fact that what you as council identified at the beginning of this process as the 4 primary strategic areas aligned quite nicely with what the community identified as the issues most important to them. Secondly, several ideas were identified within each strategic focus area, and these might fit as either new strategies under existing goals or an expansion of existing goals there as well. And next, the question of inclusion and diversity, and that one of the questions is, what are we doing as a community to look at that and emphasize that within our strategic planning efforts? And then lastly was the ongoing communication and engagement, and as we just stated, there's high expectations. You've made great progress in that area, and now they're looking for more of that as they go forward.
And I would like to point out just a little bit more on the inclusion and diversity. So no one thing rose to kind of the level that we thought it was a separate theme, you know, separate strategic focus area, but there were a lot of references to the changing demographics within the city of Raymore, the need to recognize diversity within the community, to encourage it, and to make sure that people felt included. So again, we think that this is something that the city should consider in terms of, you know, what are some things that you can kind of build on some of those changing demographics and making sure that people do feel welcome here. So the other thing that I would like to say is I apologize for the dangling letters on some of the I think that's the I think that's the transition from using a Mac and going to an HP, so I apologize for that.
Okay, so under focus area 1, the community identity and connections, just to bring this full circle then, identify and implement additional community events that bring people together, residents and businesses alike. So that was clearly a theme that emerged, that they're looking to the city for more opportunities to come together as a community. And you already have some nice programming in place in that regard, and this is reflective of that and wanting more. Secondly, focus on efforts to develop intergenerational relationships and experiences. And so we heard a theme, and that was represented in the demographics of the attendees, that they're looking for more opportunities to engage with neighbors older than and younger than themselves. And then lastly, expand communication efforts to build on initiatives already in place. So capitalize on the momentum of the good work that you're doing now.
Focus area 2. Focus area 2 then, safe, well-designed, and beautiful places. And so we put these all together again. And remember, we asked them in terms of just 2 different questions.
So you all know, I notice you're all kind of writing a little bit. We do have this, and we'll be handing it out afterwards.
Oh, great.
Or now.
So the first, the common theme here, the first, the first recommendation is to develop communication mechanisms specifically designed to enhance public safety efforts. You'll recall that's something that the resident said, hey, to feel more safe, we would like that expanded opportunity. At the same time, continue those community policing efforts. So recognizing that the police department has been active in so many initiatives within the community, but making sure to build upon those. Next, we go to the infrastructure improvements. While the top priorities were in public safety and the police department for being safe, infrastructure improvements were also mentioned, both as things that folks appreciated in the last couple of years, but something that they wanted to build on. Specifically, they mentioned lighting, bike lanes, and roadway maintenance. Beautification really is kind of the focus of the last 2 recommendations there. The first would be kind of a beautification program that was pretty broad in its reach. So from community art, people really appreciate the new community art that's around town, to well-maintained landscaping, to holiday decor. And then finally, have landscaping standards for new development and enforce those standards for existing development.
Okay, and then under economic vitality, first one, attract businesses that will provide job opportunities for Raymore residents, including light industry, manufacturing, and technology. Second, offer resources to support small businesses, focusing on unique and locally owned businesses. And that's a reference to not only the business development, but also loops back to the concerns and questions and desires around community identity and really establishing Raymore's identity. And then lastly, increased retail offerings, including sit-down restaurants, small anchor stores, and boutiques, and entertainment options.
Lastly, excuse me, I always forget. Lastly, high-performing organization. Is anybody surprised that the #1 bullet is on communication? Again, I think that's come through loud and clear. But also specifically, not just putting the information out, but also continuing to engage the community, whether it's with the community conversations like you've had, town hall meetings, surveys, other ways to engage with the elected officials. So in terms of next steps, again, we've developed this report and provided it to staff and now to all of you, and we would suggest that the staff really kind of go through it now with a fine-tooth comb and really make these draft recommendations appropriate for what you already have in place, what you need to build on, and how you need to change that, and bring that back to all of you. When you feel like the strategic plan is finalized, make sure that you're communicating that with the residents. And we encourage you, and I feel certain that this would happen anyway, to continue to provide updates to, I know Mr. Feuerborn will, to the governing body as you go forward, but also to the residents so they continue to know what you've done with the information they provided to you. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. That's awesome. And you're right, it does fall on. I like the way that the 2 came together, both between the elected officials and our community conversation. It was, because we all just kind of sat there and watched, and it was fun to see things pop up that we had discussed amongst ourselves even. Anybody else? Anything?
So that the council knows our next steps, just like with the original strategic plan following the community conversations, staff will now have a series of regular meetings that will follow our management team meeting that each week as we go through and refine what we've heard tonight, figure out how to plug it in, and get a communications plan back to you all along with the recommendation for the change in the strategic plan. So that's what we intend to do with next steps, and we are certainly going to be incorporating all of these, and for some of them, we will probably even have very specific, especially communication, we'll have very specific action plans to take to you all that are, we've already got some ideas. Yeah, I think I used the term with you all, we got to communicate that what we're communicating to these folks.
The amount of work that was put into the first community conversations was phenomenal. It came from staff with recommendations to us for the strategic plan. What I'm excited about is kind of allowing this additional information to reprioritize some of those things that we had in the initial plan, and it's going to be interesting to see how you guys tie that into that, and then we have an opportunity to push that back out to our community.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Else. Thank you very much.
Okay,
It's great seeing you guys again.
Thank you.
And we will transition over to Judge Nigro. Where'd he go? You didn't leave us, did you? No, okay.
You guys are welcome back for any Chiefs Monday Night Football game.
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully tonight too. Take care, guys. Bye, Jonathan. Bye, Patty. See you guys. Judge, how are you tonight? I am well. Good, sir. All right. Mr. Fearborn, you want to kind of kick this off?
The council had indicated at your last work session that you'd given us the thumbs up, and you will be seeing next Monday night the ordinance reappointing the judge for the 2019-2020 years, along with the increase in the salary that we had discussed with you that night. To that end, I'd asked the council if you'd like to have the judge come in, just in case there were any questions you might have of him, or he might be able to give you, I kind of thought, Judge, if you don't mind, if you could just give him a real brief update on the status of the changes in the municipal court.
All right, I will make it brief because I know everybody wants to go to Chiefs game, or watch the Chiefs games anyway. We are working at full compliance. Every time I think we're at full compliance, they change the rules on us. And that is literally, we had new rules that just passed last month that take effect. Some take effect January of 19, some take effect May of 2019. So we're actually meeting next week to discuss those new rule changes and how we're going to implement those in the court to make sure we remain in compliance with the policies that they want from the Supreme Court. The biggest problem with keeping the court in compliance is they keep changing what they want us to do. They'll tell us 2 years ago how to do a certain situation, and now they'll change it and say, no, we told you wrong, we want you to do it this way. And then we have to re-implement the procedures and the policies and get back into compliance. It's been a struggle, and it's been an ongoing battle for the last 4 years in reality. And I think we are in compliance. We're not in any trouble, but just maintaining that compliance.
Absolutely. Yeah, to follow on to that, the legislature hasn't done us any favors with regard to making it any easier. They only make it harder for you to do your job. And I've kind of watched it from the mayor's office there and seen the work that you and Donna do. And I'm just so proud of the work that you are doing and keeping us in compliance and up to date, because there are a lot of municipal courts in the area that can't say that are not as advanced with their compliance, so to speak, with everything. And it's not only the legislature, but the Missouri Supreme Court is constantly changing the rules to try to match the legislature's positions on that. And now I know how difficult that's got to be. And even you and I have discussed some modifications to the law that we can recommend to our new legislator that represents Raymore. So hopefully we'll be able to get something done, but I appreciate your input on that too, Judge.
No, and it has been an ongoing battle. Luckily, Mr. Fearborn, the chief, and Ms. Furr, we've been working at it, and we are getting the issues tackled one at a time. I know Jonathan's chimed in quite a lot on some of the issues that have been facing us. Yes, it's a new normal.
Yeah, it's the new normal, that's for sure.
And hopefully the legislature just makes some changes that makes it, that gives the court some more enforceability and some more accountability to the individuals that come before us.
Judge, if you were going to say one thing is your major overriding concern with the change, I think you gave it to me the other night, what would you say that is? As far as, yeah, I noticed you just used the term enforceability.
Yes, right now the court lacks enforceability. They've pretty much tied the court's hands about what we can and can't do, and if you're a citizen that doesn't want to come to court, there's very little for us to make you come to court. We don't really have any enforceability like we used to.
Mr. Zur? Yes.
Just real quickly, I believe the upcoming legislative session, you're going to see some additional push with regard to that enforceability, and I think that you're going to find at least an effort being put forward on a concerted effort to allow for the revocation of the licensures. And Judge Nigro, I don't know if you've had any work on that or if you've heard anyone discussing that, but I know that there have been at least a couple of municipalities that have been discussing this amongst the city attorney's perspectives. Can you have any input on that?
Yes, the failure to appear suspensions they took away for the minor traffic violations under Senate Bill 5, the original one, has left us with a situation where if you don't come to court on a minor traffic violation, especially if you don't live in the city of Raymore or close, nothing happens to you. Your license is not suspended. There's no ramifications whatsoever. So if you get a speeding ticket in Raymore and you live, let's say North Kansas City, nobody's coming to look for you in North Kansas City. So even if you issue a warrant, they're not going to get picked up and transferred here. Their license aren't going to get suspended, and they don't need to come to court. And I give an example, and I think maybe this is an example about the no insurance tickets. I give an example when I talked to some legislators years ago when this first happened, why this was a bad law, or this part of it was a bad law, because there's some good parts of Senate Bill 5, don't get me wrong. It's got some excellent changes that need to be made. But if a citizen gets 2 no insurance tickets, let's say in a year, and pays those 2 no insurance tickets and moves on with their life, all of a sudden their license is suspended. Not only do they lose their driving privileges, they have to get SR-22 for 2 years insurance, they have to pay a reinstatement fees, they have to go through the whole thing, plus paying the court costs and the fines. But if that same citizen gets 2 no insurance tickets and never goes to court, nothing ever happens to them. They don't pay the fines, their license isn't suspended, they have no ramifications. And I give that example because it happens to people. I see people come up and they're paying these no insurance tickets. They're paying their fines. They're being, citizens. They did something wrong. They're taking responsibility. But those that thumb their nose at the court don't have any accountability.
Is that different for DUIs?
It is different for DUI. Now, you can suspend licenses if somebody's driving while suspended and doesn't come to court. We can suspend their license, even though it's already suspended. It's the minor traffic that we can't do that on. And DUIs, again, if they don't come to court, we can suspend their license, but usually it's already suspended for the DUI. So there's a little more enforceability for the more serious offenses. It's the minor ones that we've lost the enforceability on.
Yeah, I think part of the change in the legislature is relabeling some of those minor infractions to be included in that process, and which came out due pass from the legislature last year, but didn't get to the floor before the close of session. The only other thing that we're stumbling block that we're having right now is that is it Eric Schmidt? I think is his name.
Schmidt, yes.
Is the new Attorney General. It was his legacy piece of legislation that was Senate Bill 5, and now he's our Attorney General. And so he'll be working with law enforcement agencies in the state. It could go either way. It could go that he wants to protect his legacy piece of legislation, or now that he's working closely with law enforcement, he sees the effects that it's having on the system and potentially soften on the issue and promote any kind of minor legislative changes that would help us in the enforcement efforts. So we've got our fingers crossed that it goes that way rather than the former, so we'll wait to see. Mr. Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question on what if a person gets a ticket for driving without a license? Is that considered a minor?
That's a minor traffic violation.
So they've already lost their license, but yet they're driving without it, and that's still a minor?
Correct. Nice.
Nice.
And what's even, is that's also one that's supposed to be on it's on the TV, the Traffic Violations Bureau fine schedule, so they won't even need to come to court. They could pay that ahead of time. That's one of the charges they've listed on there.
Anyone else? Mr. Circo?
Well, I feel for you, 20 years in the insurance business, we go down to Jeff City all the time and fight this because it's all, you have to have it. But nobody, 47% of the people in Missouri don't carry it. And they have all these problems, they don't get cited, they get a ticket like you said, they don't care. We can't do nothing about it. They're out there doing what you say, but it's such a minor thing. And things happen, they'll tell the officer, I don't have insurance. And they let them still drive off. I don't have a license. They drive off. And it's just puzzled. We fought that for years, trying to get it mandated to get a little bit higher stature. And we just, like you said, it just doesn't get done. It's just sad.
And it's even worse when you have the victims of an accident come in and they're like, well, they didn't have insurance. Well, there's a fine. That's all I can do is fine them $225, the maximum.
Anybody have any questions for the judge? Next step?
You will have this ordinance for first read next Monday night. Second read will be December 10th, and the judge will be all set for January 1, assuming you pass it.
Yes, let's hope. Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Judge.
Have a great
Appreciate
night.
it.
Don't be
Keep
here
up the
all
good
night.
work. That concludes our two formal items on the agenda tonight. Is there anything under other that anyone would like to bring up? Mr. Townsend?
Not necessarily other, but just I won't be here next council session. I'll be out of town on business.
Okay. Sonia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share real quick. I went to the Good Neighbor, Strong Community training, really was what it was, put on by the school district this last weekend. And Allison Scott, who's the director of RAPEC Cares, asked me to share with the council that on January 17th at 6 o'clock, the RAPEC Cares organization is going to be showing a movie called Resilience, the Biology of Stress and Science of Hope. They showed it at the meeting on Saturday also, and she asked me to encourage other city leaders to attend the showing of this movie, and then after the movie there will be, it's actually a documentary, there will be a little conversation around it afterwards. I believe it's at Centerview, and they're going to have dinner, so mark your calendars, and I have flyers I didn't bring. January 17th at 6 o'clock. 6 to 8 are the times that were on the flyer. Like I said, dinner, the movie, and some conversation. Just want to be sure you get that on your calendar.
Thank you. Mr. Holman?
Yeah, I've got something that's kind of a timely matter if we are going to do it. You all will remember that last year we approved the funding for putting holiday lights on Centerview as well as City Hall. We did not at that time include the rack because it was not done. I asked Jim if that was possible to be done this year and what the cost would be. He's provided that to me. I think you said $8,000, is that correct? Mr. Fearborn, to buy the lights, and we would own them and they would put them up. I would like to propose that we authorize the funding to include the rack. It stays with the continuous theme of what we've already done. We've already seen some positive citizen return on that via comments that they like it. So that's what I've got.
Mr. Berenson?
Yeah, Jay, what's the reoccurring cost? The initial cost is $8,000, and then what's the reoccurring cost annually after that?
That would be for staff to answer.
Unfortunately, because of the size of the rack, $8,000 would be the recurring. They would need to rent the equipment to get up on the roof.
Mr. Killen?
Got a question about that. Would this fall underneath administrative expenditure in an existing budget, or would we need to make a budget amendment for this?
I greatly appreciate this, but you're all looking at me and you need to be looking at him. They have the answers. I don't. I'm sorry.
It would require a budget amendment. We would be bringing a budget amendment to you. You can't vote on this tonight, obviously.
That's where I'm at with it.
It would be a thumbs up or a thumbs down to bring a budget amendment to you, as well as a change in the agreement with the company. If you wanted to see that on a...
Further discussion, or want to do a thumbs up thing?
Mr. Mayor, I'm good with thumbs up. It's just that the way that it sounded like to me was that we were preparing to make a motion, but no, I'm good with it the way staff has explained it. So I'm a thumbs up there.
Yeah, just a consensus here. We're looking. Anybody? Anybody? We'll know at the time. Okay, looks like we got enough to go on the agenda.
Very good, sir.
Okay. Mr. Turco.
I want to bring some up real quick to the council. I met with Mr. Fearborn and Mr. Carteret and John. We have some situation where homeowners, beautifications in their neighborhoods, they keep the homes and the grass and things and trash and everything, but a lot of places aren't homeowners. And a lot of places, I got some people and myself where there's areas out here people allow stuff to build up in their backyards with trailers and overgrown trees and this junk. But when we talk about code enforcement, it's pretty limited on a beautification code enforcement that we have in the city. They're only limited. So what I was going to just bring to the council is allow Mr. Fearborn and his staff, if we would agree, to let him look into this. They don't have a lot unless we allow it, to look into maybe some type of a beautification enforcement that our city would have for residents and commercial, but primarily residents, that they don't accumulate a lot of stuff in their yards. Because I wouldn't want that my neighbors looking at all the time, some of these houses and some of the stuff that accumulates. And if that's right, but Mr. Fearborn and them would just have to have us allow him to look into it, maybe come up with something, him and his staff, and bring it back to us. Just give him the open door to do that.
I don't have any problems with staff looking into something for us, but Mr. Zur, most code enforcement regulations are not built on, quote, the term beautification, but more on health and safety. If you have ugly property and you're within code, that's okay, but it's if that something within that property violates the code that might become a health or safety violation or issue for other residents. Am I correct?
That's a fair statement. I would note that the council acted just recently with regard to the hoarders provisions too, which will take into account some of that. Again, that's all based upon a public safety welfare.
And that has had a positive impact on one violator?
I think you'd have to talk with Mr. Carteret about where it's been used for enforcement purposes at this point.
It's actually working very well.
Yep. Yeah. Same here. Anyone else? There's nothing else. The meeting is over. Thank you.